The Dungeon Master Experience is a series of articles written by Chris Perkins in Dungeon Magazine in 2011. The following readings are his words, and though produced before the current edition, still contains great insights, advice, and tips for Dungeon Masters for any edition, and for that matter, any TTRPG. Setups and Payoffs, 10/6/2011. Wednesday night. Epic tier. The heroes are on a collision course with Star-Lord Evandor, an Eladrin warlock who plans to free a bunch of evil star gods from their celestial prisons. Unfortunately for the heroes, they possess some information that Evandor needs, and so the villain dispatches one of his apprentices and a strike team of mind flayers to retrieve it one way or another. Despite their clever infiltration of the party's ship, Evandor's evil agents are swiftly dealt with and his apprentice captured. After interrogating the prisoners, Deimos, played by Chris Youngs, decides it would be prudent to off her, or at the very least toss her overboard. Ravok, Andrew Finch's new Goliath battle-mind character, thinks Evandor's apprentice might be more useful as a prisoner than a corpse, so he urges Deimos not to be hasty. Deimos reluctantly, yet wisely as it turns out, opts to keep her alive a short while longer. When Ravok tries to use a sending ritual to contact some allies of his, a holy order of Paylord worshippers who are working against Star-Lord Evandor, the Mind Flayers, he quickly realizes something is amiss. They've been arrested on trumped-up charges of treason by the crew of the Bloodmonger, an Imperial warship under the command of a Dragonborn captain named Artana, whose ship, according to intelligence reports, was lost during an intelligence-gathering mission in enemy waters. Not only has the warship's crew been partially lobotomized by mind flayers, but the captain and her first mate have been replaced by doppelgangers in league with Star-Lord Evandor. Rather than risk losing prisoners in a bloody conflict, the heroes inform Captain Artana that they have one of Star-Lord Evandor's apprentices in their custody. Surely she is worth something to Evandor, so the heroes begin negotiating a prisoner exchange. My players learned a valuable lesson this week. Sometimes it pays to take prisoners. As for me, I take no prisoners. At least not when it comes to throwing new challenges at my players and fishing for those wow moments that really pull players into the heart of the campaign. Ask yourself, when was the last time your players found themselves in the middle of a classic prisoner exchange? In the case of my Wednesday night group, it's been a long time, so it took my players a few minutes to get back into the, oh, hang on, we don't need to kill everything just yet groove. As a DM and storyteller, I live for those moments, when something that happened earlier in the campaign helps, hinders, or haunts the PCs later on. It might be something a character did, something an NPC said, or some seemingly random occurrence that suddenly becomes significant. Sometimes it's accidental, sometimes it's planned, but when it happens, you know it instantly. You see it on your players' faces, the dawning horror, amusement, or relief brought on by the moment of revelation. Novelists and screenwriters can elicit moments of revelation using a foreshadowing technique I like to call the setup and the payoff. The idea is that you establish something early in the story and then pay it off later. In this week's example from my Wednesday night campaign, the surrender of Star-Lord Evandor's apprentice was the setup, and her value as a tradable commodity is the payoff. The players felt instant gratification because the story was rewarding them for not only keeping the evil apprentice alive, but also for realizing they had the perfect bargaining chip. It's possible that one or more of the players saw it coming, but I don't think that diminished their enjoyment of the moment or made me feel any less brilliant. It's like that moment in a James Bond movie, when Q gives 007 a new gadget. You expect that the gadget will come into play at some point, and so you wait for the payoff. Sometimes in the heat of the narrative, you forget that Bond has the gadget, so when it finally comes into play, there's a nice moment of surprise. The Aston Martin's ejection set in Goldfinger 1963 is a classic example. The wrist-mounted dart gun in Moonraker 1979 is another, and especially surprising because it comes into play not once, but twice. Conversely, if Q gave Bond gadgets that he never used, what would be the point? The writers know they can't set up something like that and not pay it off. Of course, novelists and screenwriters don't have to worry about RPGers mucking with the story of their novels and screenplays. they have total control when it comes to planting their setups and payoffs. A dungeon master, on the other hand, doesn't have complete control of the story and can't always predict what the heroes will do next. Consequently, not every setup has the perfect payoff. If my Wednesday night heroes had thrown Evandor's apprentice overboard or killed her outright, the encounter with the captain, Artana, would have played out very differently. A setup that hinges on the characters keeping a captured villain alive is risky, but there are other kinds of setups that are subtle and thus more likely to pay off later. For example, at this summer's Live Acquisitions Incorporated game, I set up a mystery involving several crates of raw hamburger, which were delivered to the Dark Magic estate, no hint of who ordered or sent them. Later on, the heroes learned of the enmity between the New Hampshire Dark Magics and the Wisconsin Warstaffs, and that most of the Warstaffs' family were necromancers by trade. The big payoff came in the climactic battle when the hamburger was transformed into 4 undead minotaurs by a Warstaff necromantic ritual. The time that passes between the setup and the payoff can vary. You don't want the payoff to happen too soon after the setup, but in a long-running campaign, you can delay the payoff for months or years. In my Wednesday night game, the heroic tier heroes were arrested for attacking a military weapons foundry. While in captivity, Rodney Thompson's character was tortured by a dragonborn priest of Tiamat, who placed one of Vargas's eyes with a unique magic item called an Eye of Vengeance. The magic eye was supposed to be delivered to the island prison of Zard-Karath, where it would find its way to an imprisoned one-eyed dragonborn pirate named Vantajar. On the voyage to Zard-Karath, Vargas and his companions escaped, and it wasn't until Epic Tier, nearly 2 years later, when Vantajar was released from prison, came searching for his missing eye. Lessons learned. Not every setup will pay off in a satisfying manner. However, this fact doesn't discourage me from planting seeds that will hopefully bear fruit in the future, because when the payoff happens, it's immensely gratifying. It makes me appear so much smarter than I actually am. Here are 3 classic D&D setups and payoffs which I use from time to time and which you're free to plunder for your home campaign. Setup number 1. The heroes find a strange word scrawled in blood on the floor, etched into a wall, or written on the side cover of a spellbook or diary. Payoff. The word turns out to be a password to bypass a magical trap or unlock a sealed vault. The command word to deactivate a golem, the true name of an evil fiend, or a clever anagram. Setup 2. The heroes find a locket on the corpse of a slain NPC. It contains a tiny painted portrait of someone familiar or unfamiliar to them. Payoff. The heroes come face to face with the figure portrayed in the locket, a distraught or vengeful lover, one of the hero's relatives with a secret to share, or an NPC willing to reward the heroes for returning the locket and completing a quest. Setup 3. The heroes find an intelligent magic item with a secret past. Payoff. Someone recognizes the item in a future encounter and shares a bit of history that sheds light on the item's previous owner, or the secret curse that haunts all who wield it. Until the next encounter. Also, don't forget to follow the link in the description to pick up my first ever adventure and setting for free on Patreon and DriveThruRPG now. Dive into the desert region of Gondolar as adventurers making their way to the budding city town of Silt Pass in search of gold, glory, and answers to the secrets of a long-lost empire. In this first adventure, your heroes will defend the Dune Dancer, a sandcutter airship from a legendary group of bandits known as the Stormbringers. Do you have what it takes to stop the Stormbringers and their bombastic leader Therok, or will you make a deal with the devil of the sands and join them? Decide your destiny in the first of 6 adventures. TSI, Therok, Stormbringer, Ironmane.